Welcome back to Media7, where I'm discussing news about the news with Toby Manhire and Trish Carter. Al Jazeera TV's coverage of recent events in Egypt and before that Tunisia has been extraordinary. The same can't be said, well, not in a good way, of all media organisations. Jose Barbosa has been watching.
From the very beginning, digital media was in the mix. Footage of the Tunisia revolution, itself partly spurred by the Wikileaks dump, was viewed across the Middle East both online and on TV. And for Egypt, it served as an example. If Tunisia could get rid of Ben Ali, surely they could show Mubarak the same door. Meanwhile, over at Glenn Beck's Playhouse, it's the end times.
The entire Mediterranean is on fire.
Bill O'Reilly of Fox News spent a large part of his show last week casting Al Jazeera as the main catalyst for anti-American violence in the region.
And any Arab leader who supports America is barbecued on the network, while those who hate America are praised. When the vicious pro-Iranian mullah al-Sadr returned to Iraq recently, Al Jazeera covered it live. Al-Sadr telling the crowd, quote, "Our common enemy, America, Israel, Britain, repeat after me, no, no, America."
But while Bill was palling around with the rest of the Shirt Tails gang in the treehouse...
Information!
That's not Al Jazeera speaking.
Witchcraft!
On the ground, things were getting tense.
Seem to be moving or, hitting the ground. Oh, yeah, I just saw.
Foreign journalists were now being targeted, reportedly by Mubarak supporters. CNN's Julian Assange got a knuckle Peter bread.
We only had about a block left to go when another guy came up and punched me in the head.
And Al Jazeera had its broadcasting licence revoked and some of its journalists arrested.
We're going to keep these images for you guys live until we are actually forced off the air either by the police or if our signal is somehow interrupted.
But despite all this, the regime has found it can't stop the signal.
Today, every protester is a journalist, uploading videos, pictures straight from the field. Traditional media can't compete with that.
Jose Barbosa there. Well, Trish, it has been an extraordinary month for Al Jazeera, Tunisia, then Egypt, with the Palestine papers in between. How's the mood in Doha? Do they feel they're making history at the moment?
Look, I was talking to them last night and I can only say that the phrase that they are using is a sense of mission and a sense of opportunity. Wada Kamfa, who's the Director General of the network, referred to a transformational month for the network. And you can see that now with the thrust that they are now making to get into the United States. So they're excited, they are.
The impression seems to have been that Al Jazeera has so many people on the ground in these countries. Is that the case?
I think that after Tunisia, they got information from their contacts and sources that this thing was going to ripple out. They didn't know if it was going to ripple out to Saudi or if it was going to ripple out to Egypt. So quietly they began to move new teams into their bureaus in Egypt, and they began to bolster the people that they had in there. And I think it was after the time of the first Facebook call, I think, where they had 80 to 100,000 sign up on that first day. Jazeera had 4 full teams in the square, plus teams in Alexandria and in other parts of the Middle East. And so with a combination of the Arabic channel and the English channel working together, they began this rollout of coverage. The coverage, as you've indicated, displeased many of the Egyptian authorities, and they were pulled off Nilesat, forcing them onto 2 transponders. But that's, of course, where the internet comes into play, because it went viral, telling people where they could find the coverage. Their satellite signals were disrupted all of that week. Equipment was confiscated. Their website was hacked. Their credentials were pulled, as you've indicated, by government authorities, and the unattended bureau was ransacked by some unknown group. So for long periods of the protest activity, Al Jazeera had to go underground, and that's when the safety plan, and that's when the issues of safety really come into their own. You have to move locations often, and in their case you would have seen where they had their unknown correspondents voicing live pictures and on the move all the time. It's reporting by stealth, I think, is the way it's been described, and that is exactly what it is.
And quite clearly, including one of the clips that Jose had in his VT there, people who had reasonable, cause to fear for their safety.
Safety, I think, has been quite interesting on this deployment for all media organisations. I have a feeling, I don't know if it's correct or not, because I'm in New Zealand and I'm not there, but that because it was a pro-democracy movement, that some of the reporting teams might have been lulled into a slight sense of false security pretty early on. That changed, I might say, very quickly. It's been reported that pro-government supporters singled out Jazeera news crews, but really no news organisation was exempt, I think, from what has been an orchestrated campaign to intimidate news organisations. Certainly, I think there was a volatile situation at the Hilton Cairo, which was the hotel de jour for the international journalists this time round, where pro-Mubarak supporters turned up and began to chant outside, "Death to Al Jazeera." And it happened, I'm told, at a time...
Which would have pleased Bill O'Reilly.
You know, if they can have Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck in the United States, I think they really can have Al Jazeera, but that's another matter. I'm told that there was a number of international media in the lobby when this happened, and all of them were unified, but all of them were quite shocked, I think, at the passion that they were experiencing. And the Hilton asked them to, in actual fact, stop broadcasting from the area because they feared for the safety of their own employees and that of the hotel.
And now, Toby, Trish mentioned the Facebook call that clearly Al Jazeera was watching, and it got people into the square. What's your feel for the impact of the internet and social media on what's happened there?
Well, I think it's easy to exaggerate it, but it's also foolish to underestimate the role it had. When you look at what happened in, even if you assume that Tunisia didn't have anything to do with social networking or Wikipedia, which I think it probably did, if you assume that, clearly the social networking mechanisms had an effect in Egypt from what happened in Tunisia.
Even just mobile phones, I think.
All of that. So instant messaging, tweeting, Facebook, the young Google marketing executive who had a big Facebook group, 400,000 followers, and then was imprisoned for 12 days, I think.
He's going to have a great story to tell. I note with interest today that he's saying that he was treated with respect, and if you can say you were blindfolded by 12 days, has been treated with respect, and that he wasn't tortured. Again, talking to some contacts in the region last night, he may not have been physically tortured, but certainly he heard torture around him. He saw things that were completely unpalatable, and he's just going to have a great story to tell. That
brief interview that he had on release, which was on an Egyptian channel, which is interesting, was incredibly powerful, and I gather that's been all over the US networks this week. It's really worked.
It has really worked, and I think that Al Jazeera, when things got really tricky for them, citizen video, the mobile phones, etc., as you say, really came into their own. And they had teams of people back in Doha doing nothing else but scouring the internet, YouTube, you name it, looking for new pieces of video that they could add to their own coverage.
And one thing that really fascinated me was that they were using Twitter to stay in touch with their own correspondents in the field. So we could see the communications from the reporters in the field at the same time as their editors could. I thought that was extraordinary.
I know, and One Campfire, I think again, the Director General of the network has said that they are now working hand in hand with the social network crowd, and that's just going to be the way it is from here on in.
Toby, the research now coming out about what Americans make of this is, I think, astonishing and surprising. News viewing figures are at their highest in years, and that is despite more than half of all US news being Egypt in the past week. What do you make of that? Because we're trained to assume that Americans don't care about foreign stories.
It's astonishing and it's encouraging. I also read a headline somewhere suggesting that slightly more than half of Americans didn't know that there was news in Egypt at all, and the two statistics can go hand in hand, so we probably shouldn't be...
So the half the country that does know is transfixed by it.
But it's also, I think, in New Zealand, that memo should perhaps go to some of the editors in broadcast and print, that people are interested in this stuff if you can tell the story in the right way. And you look at the tools that Al Jazeera are deploying to tell it, everything from live blogging to live streaming to tweeting, and their penetration now in America. I read somewhere that in America traffic on Al Jazeera site had gone up by 20-fold. And that's just astonishing.
2,500% increase. That is, if you can believe any of the media figures, and 10% of that, I think, from North America.
Now, something else that Americans were watching this week, as Sam noted in the source, was the Super Bowl. Let's have a look at the Super Bowl commercial for a new product.
America, get ready to meet The Daily, the world's first daily tablet newspaper. National news and events, The world of sports, entertainment and culture, and more. Totally interactive and delivered straight to your tablet. The Daily is about to make the way you get your news wonderful.
And here it is, The Daily on the iPad. I had to fake up a US iTunes account to get it, but this is the Great White Hope, isn't it, Toby? This is Rupert Murdoch's attempt to get people to pay for news. What do you make of it?
Well, I applaud the venture, and if there's a good Uncle Rupert and an evil Uncle Rupert, this is the good Uncle Rupert at work here. Unfortunately, I don't think it's very good. It's not very iPad-y, basically, if you're used to using an iPad. It has sort of less functionality and dynamism than the Harry McCleary app on my iPad. And it's slightly cursed by being the Daily. It is literally the Daily. It uses the old-school newspaper idea of pressing a button at midnight and rolling out and everyone picks it up, and that's fine for the Super Bowl, probably. But to launch in a week when Egypt is everywhere, it's a real problem. Their correspondent in Egypt, in fact, tweeted this morning, innocuously, a link to the online version of his piece on Egypt, and he said, but it's all quite outdated now, given what's happened. And sort of there it is there, you know.
Yeah. Aren't these technologies meant to be right here, right now?
Yeah. It has to be a work in progress, though. It's the only hope, isn't it?
Of course, and I'm sure it will improve, and I really hope it does. And it's very easy to be sceptical about these things. However, to me, it reads like a slow issue of Newsweek at the front and sort of middle-ranking in-flight magazine at the back, and you need to have some content that's gonna wake people up, you know.
That's harsh. Assuming someone does get this right, just briefly, Trish, do you like the model? Would you pay $40 US a year for something that did the job right? Because that seems to be what Murdoch's trying to get people to do.
If the content is good enough, absolutely I would.
Well, maybe people will, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in your industry watching to see whether that does happen. And that's our show for this week. Thanks to Toby Manhire and Trish Carter, and thanks to you for watching. Media7 will be back next week, but I won't. Jose Barbosa will be your host while I'm in Wellington preparing for our special from the Webstock conference. It's all very exciting. Goodbye.